This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, Season 10, Episode 5. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network of podcasts brought to you by HK. Today is Wednesday, June 5th, 2024, as of the recording of this episode. And I've got back with me, I'm, of course, your host, Riley Bowman, but co-host Jacob Paulsen. It's been a while.
Yeehaw!
Where you been?
Where have I been? I don't know.
I don't know. I'm just
Around?
messing with you.
Not here, I guess.
Today is our Justified Saves episode, or where we discuss defensive gun use stories and provide our own analysis of those stories. It's also been, I think, a while since we did one of these episodes. Not necessarily intentionally trying to skip them, just the way things worked out for the last, month or two or so. So excited to bring some interesting and sometimes exciting stories to you. There's always lessons to be learned, and that's one of the reasons why we do this episode. But first, today's episode is sponsored by HK, or Heckler & Koch. That is my choice of firearm now. Jacob also working on getting him set up with a new VP9SK, which is what I've been carrying for the last little bit. So pretty exciting stuff when you finally get that in your hands.
Yeah, I've been shooting, taking them to the range and working them a little bit, and I'm pretty excited.
Yeah. We appreciate HK's support of the podcast and of everything we do here at concealedcarry.com. Please go to hk-usa.com to learn more about them and their offerings, their products, and product lines. Check them out. Also, today's episode, they're always a sponsor of Justified Saves episodes. That is CCW Safe, because if you're involved in a defensive gun use, who do you want backing you up? Well, CCW Safe is our choice, backed by quality people that believe in their mission in supporting their members, truly in whatever needs to be done in the legal aftermath that can follow such incidents. Some of the stories we're going to share today, I promise you, like absolutely for some of these people, could be forever life-changing, life-altering. Arguably, that's the case regardless. But in terms of affecting whether they stay free and out of jail, whether they keep the money in their bank accounts, whatever. Like, you want to have good legal representation, which is the service that CCW Safe helps provide you. We believe they're the best in the industry. Check them out. ccwsafe.com is where you can get signed up and learn more. Anything else you want to add there, Jacob?
No, I think that's well said. We're going to see some doozies today for sure.
For sure. Hey, before we get to our first story, I'm kind of springing this upon you, but I saw it pop up yesterday in the news, and I had a good chuckle because of the ties to Colorado here. Not necessarily related to Justified Saves or anything like that, but I just think it's always interesting. But yesterday marked the 20-year anniversary since, do you know what? Take a guess.
20 years.
Yes.
So that would have been 2004.
Yep.
June 2000. No, I got nothing.
Yeah, he's got nothing. 20 years since the famous Killdozer incident in Granby, Colorado.
So, yeah, I think that's come up on the podcast before. It's a wild one.
Yeah, it has. So I just saw that pop up in the news, and I was like, oh yeah, 20 years since that happened. Folks, if you're not familiar, you can actually go watch a pretty interesting documentary for free. It's on YouTube. I just found it yesterday. You can search Tread documentary. Tread, like it's named after, because like the story, if you're not familiar, Marvin Heemeyer is this guy that bought this property. He had like a muffler shop on there and was just trying to do his business, and he wanted to like get things rezoned or something. And then like the concrete plant next door wanted to change their operation, and Marvin was trying to get an easement or something to his property, and the city was against him because there was people on the city council and in the zoning and planning commission that didn't like him, and they wouldn't let him do what he wanted to do. So when he decided he'd had enough, he bought a 65-ton Komatsu bulldozer, and Anyway, let's get into our first story of today's episode. We've got a story out of Ponca City. I think it's probably Ponca
Ponca.
City, Oklahoma.
Ponca? Sure.
Yeah. One dead after exchanging gunfire, attempting to enter a Ponca City home forcibly. So in the first story here, we have a situation where 29-year-old suspect or attempted to enter a residence. He fired shots at the folks that lived there, and they fired right back. This is a pretty straightforward story, so I guess a good place to start. Nothing too crazy here, but happened around 7 p.m. This was just a couple of days ago. It says it was reported on June 3rd, so presumably it happened, I think, on Sunday, June 2nd. 7 p.m. on a lazy Sunday night. You never know when these kinds of things can happen when someone decides to show up on your doorstep. And so I think the lesson here is to be ready and be prepared. You never know when that situation is going to come your way.
Yeah, it mentions that there's some sort of domestic situation,
Yeah,
right? So maybe this guy's the ex boyfriend, ex husband, ex
who knows?
something. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the baby daddy. I mean, I don't know, but I was thinking about this because there's not a lot of people these days who aren't dealing with some sort of domestic issue. Maybe maybe not you specifically, but maybe it's one of your kids or a sibling or whatever, and that doesn't take that much to extend to and get you tied in and pulled into the drama, right? So, a bunch of crazies out there right now. So,
Yep.
yeah, we see a lot of that. I think the data I've seen most recently would suggest that a massive amount of violent crime is tied to domestic issues. So it might be the criminal,
Absolutely. I mean, I've talked before on the podcast about the domestic situation that happened next door to me that, was pretty interesting and scary at the time since I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
As my neighbor's car got absolutely destroyed by essentially a spurned lover, if you will. So,
Well, the thing that goes through my mind is in a domestic situation, that person has a lot more knowledge and awareness of my home, my setting,
yep,
right? So a random criminal may not know, you know, in anything that they can't immediately observe. But in a domestic situation, that person might know that I have some big ladder in the backyard that they can grab and use to get up into some window, or they might know that I never lock XYZ door, or that I got sliding glass doors that can be broken, or whatever thing, right? So you know is your home security locked down sufficiently that even those people who maybe know a few things about you um, are not at risk intruders.
yeah, yep, absolutely. Well, let's see. Our next story here. This one's pretty interesting, and actually is where I took the title of today's episode from, about a woman being saved by an Uber driver. I actually don't know for sure it was Uber. I just know that it was a rideshare driver of some kind, and saved her from a naked man attacking her. Nude man shot by rideshare driver after allegedly assaulting woman in Orange County. And this was reported on KTLA.com. Jacob, you want to take the lead on this one?
Yeah, there's some things here that are a little unknown, but here's most of the story comes from an interview of a neighbor. So we have a neighbor who's the witness here, and the neighbor, as they tell it, they're looking out their window and they see a man beating on a woman. And they're like, "Oh, that's not good," right? And they look a little closer, like, "Oh, that dude's nude. Dude's got no clothes on. He's beating on that woman. What's going on?" So presumably, this is some sort of domestic incident itself, right? That unrelated to the neighbor. So the neighbor who's witnessing this exits the house, right? Decides, I'm going to go take a closer look, see what's going on. So in their words, it says the witness ran outside. So runs outside, and when they get out there, they see that the attacker, the nude dude, the naked dude, is now, quote, punching a rideshare driver's car. Okay, so now we have an additional person involved in the incident. It was just the naked dude beating on the woman, and now we have a rideshare driver who's involved. We don't know Did this rideshare driver get called to this scene? Was he supposed to come pick someone up, or is he just cruising through? Does he live in the neighborhood? Who knows? Your guess is as good as
Right.
ours. But apparently he's identifiable as a rideshare driver. So maybe he's got Uber or Lyft lights or stickers or something. I don't know. But anyway, so now we got the naked dude who was beating on the woman, who allegedly is now beating on the car of the rideshare driver. And the rideshare driver decides they don't like that. The passenger door and hatch are open at some point. And so as they're yelling and screaming and arguing and punches are getting thrown, the rideshare driver, engages with the gun. And there's at least two shots. The witness says they heard two shots. And the naked man gets shot. He's less than happy, presumably. And yeah, the lady's not getting beat on anymore.
Right. Right. Yeah, and the suspect in this incident was taken to the hospital in critical but stable condition, so presumably will pull through that. Um, when I see stories like this where a nude individual is involved, I often think it could be because of something drug related or whatever, or they're having some kind of mental snap, mental episode. Typically people you don't find running around attacking people nude, and again we don't know for sure. Maybe it was happened outside this person's home, this woman's home, and this is her partner or somebody that knows her that lives there, and he just happened to be nude as he uh, got into an incident with her outside in front of their home or whatever. We don't know, but just understand and be prepared. If you encounter an assailant of some kind that is nude, there's a good chance that they're not quite in the right mind, and those are sometimes difficult situations to handle. That they're probably not going to respond rationally to commands, to challenges, and maybe hopped up on something, meaning that they're a little bit more difficult to actually control. So, just some things to consider there. So kind of
A
what I
lot
took
of
from this.
this, yeah, a lot of my perspective from this story comes down to like, well, how do I decide if I'm going to get involved? And if I get involved,
Yep.
how am I going to get involved? We have another quote from a second witness, a different neighbor, who tells the police that, quote, she heard someone believed to be the rideshare driver tell the suspect that he was going to fire a warning shot and
Mm,
yelled stop. So, and then, based on this other witness, at some point in the, dude's punching on the rideshare driver's car, the rideshare driver, probably displays the gun, I'm assuming, and says something like, stop, I'm going to fire a warning shot, something like that. At least someone, a witness claims to have heard the driver warned that he would fire a warning shot, threatened to fire a warning shot. So another little interesting detail in there. But hey, if
yeah.
I'm just cruising through a neighborhood and I see some naked dude beating on some lady, I'm going to be inclined to get involved. That would seem like something I could manage that, right? If I'm a neighbor and I look out the window and I see a naked dude beating on some lady, I'm likely to get involved. But I think there's definitely some tactics as far as how I might do that successfully. In the case of me having a car, that makes it a lot easier. I can put the car between me and that person. I can use the car as a barrier, a piece of cover or concealment or whatever word you want to use. Doesn't really matter to me in this case. And I can manage that with a certain amount of protection between me and them. But certainly someone should be getting on the phone dialing 911, right? Getting police rolling would be really important.
hmm Yeah, and let's not forget too that not every situation requires the use or the presentation of a gun. I'm not saying that's necessarily the case here. I don't think we know enough specifics of the situation itself as to what would be the best approach as far as tools used. But I mean, OC spray is a valid tool. Could that have been effective here without necessarily having to bring a gun into the equation? I don't know. I mean, but I think it's just another reminder that it's not. I would say it's. I mean, first of all, it's not particularly common that regular Americans carry guns for defense. I'd like to see that increase in terms of numbers, responsibly, of course. And it's probably even more rare you have gun-toting Americans that also have secondary forms or tools such as OC spray, less lethal options, right? So another good, I think, reminder of, hey, there are some problems where, as Chuck Haggard likes to say, where that OC spray can be that tool, that option between a harsh word and a gun, and having options, I think, is a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. I would not want to be the guy sitting in a car while some crazy whack job naked dude is trying to punch through my driver's side window. That would be a really bad situation to be in where you might feel like you have limited options. If that glass gets broken and he comes through, now I got some pretty limited options. So, again, it comes down to those tactics of how am I going to approach the situation to maximize my odds of having more options, more time, more tools.
Yep. Yep. Good stuff. All righty. Next up, we got a story out of Ormond Beach, Florida. Good Samaritan holds attempted carjacker at gunpoint in Ormond Beach, police say. Happened at an Exxon gas station just off US 1 and I-95. This is quite, and actually, this is another incident where a third party gets involved. We've got a couple of those today. And so in this situation, you have a gentleman, he stops at a gas station, and there's some interesting details that are pointed out in this story. And there's a whole, kind of video interview. You can go and pull this story up. This is reported on clickorlando.com. And of course, as always, with all of our Justified Save episodes, we always include links in the show notes to the stories we cover in the episode. But in this incident, there's this gentleman, he stops at a gas station, and the thing that he said right off the bat that was pretty interesting is he says this: my 3-year-old is with us in the backseat of the car. So he's presumably with a wife or whomever, and also a 3-year-old child that's with them. He stops at this gas station. He's pumping gas. He says, just doing my own thing. And I was talking to her in the backseat, apparently referring to his 3-year-old. I opened the back door and I noticed the lady behind me, and she was acting kind of weird. She wasn't pumping gas. Interesting. That's worthwhile, I think, to note, that, hey, when things seem out of place, there's a good chance they are out of place. When someone is in a particular context, a gas station, and they're not doing, their actions aren't consistent with that context, gas station, but not pumping gas or not, doing other things that would make sense at a gas station. This is something we should take note of. This is a part of basic, kind of managing unknown contacts, or muck as it's known. And so he does notice that, but she doesn't engage him. Instead, she ends up running over to another vehicle. There's an older couple who are also getting gas, and this woman attempts to jump into the driver's seat of that car. So this gentleman sees this happen. He's a younger guy with his family. He starts, and this is interesting. He says, so I proceeded to get my gun out of its case. So apparently he was not carrying it. And I mean, that's okay. It's not ideal, but I mean, at least he had an option here, right? But he manages, but just imagine how this might have gone if she'd chosen to attack him and his family, right? He may not have had that opportunity to get the gun out of its case before things became relevant, right? And so he gets his gun out of the case and he goes over to that other vehicle where that older couple is. Now this older gentleman is trying to grab onto this woman who's trying to steal his car with his wife in it. And that's the critical thing here is now this has turned not just into a carjacking where she's trying to, take the car, but this is now also an attempted kidnapping potentially. I don't know what the physical condition of this older woman in that car is, if she's able to get out or what, but it doesn't really matter. It's not really relevant. And this father of this 3-year-old child grabs his gun, goes over, points it at her. He says this: I proceeded to get my firearm out and point it at her to make sure she didn't have any weapons or anything. And then he later said that he put his gun down when he realized she wasn't armed. They attempted, the older gentleman, the owner of the car, attempted to be, she was attempting to carjack, and this gentleman, the Good Samaritan in this case, attempt to restrain her. Police are called, police arrive, take her into custody. So that's basically the gist of the story. Pretty crazy. There's a lot going on there. And again, this is a third-party Good Samaritan individual getting involved in somebody else's situation, and I would say rightfully so. And good on him. He was saluted by and high-fived by the cops, and they even talked to his daughter and said, "Hey, your daddy's the hero of this thing today," and all is well. But there's probably some other lessons to take away from this, Jacob.
Yeah, let's talk about the gun case a little bit further. You brought that up. So dude's traveling with his family, guns not on him. It's in a case. We don't know where the case is. Was it in the trunk? Was it next to him in the driver's seat? Was it in the back seat with the kid? Who knows? We don't know. What we do know is the incident took place in Florida, and that this man is from North Carolina. They
Yep.
said that
Yep.
he was in the middle of a 10-hour drive home. So I'm just double checking right now. Yeah, but I'm pretty sure that there's plenty of reciprocity. Let's just see here. I'm confirming my
Yeah.
belief.
Being
So yeah,
Florida, there's a high probability.
confirmed. Yeah, high probability, right? So if he had a North Carolina concealed carry permit, then certainly that's valid in Florida. That's a non-issue. So there's nothing that would keep him legally from having his gun on him. So that was the first thing I thought. I was like, well, maybe he was in a non-permissive place, in which case maybe you'd have to have that gun in the case. But that was not the case. That was a choice. That was a decision. And if it was his car that some lady was jumping into the front seat of and pulling him out of, and now trying to get away with his kid in the back and maybe his wife as well, you definitely be wishing you had that gun on you and not in that case, right?
Yep.
So good situational awareness, but maybe it'd be better to have that gun on you. I thought there was a couple interesting things in here. I'm really concerned about the statement he made. And again, sometimes statements get made that don't truly reflect one's feelings or beliefs at the time. But certainly the way he said it suggested that he pointed the gun at the person purely with the objective of finding out if they were armed. If I point this gun at you, I'll find out if you have a weapon. That's the way that's portrayed in the statement that the journalist wrote in the news story, which is super less than awesome. And in this case, I mean, cops have been patting you on the back. Everyone says you're a hero. The news station shows up to do a little story. So you're probably feeling pretty at liberty in terms of what you're saying. You're like, I'm not getting charged. I did a good thing. And now is the time you say something that gets you in trouble. Now the DA or prosecutor's like, oh, crap. If that's the case, then I feel inclined I have to prosecute if that's what you did, right? So some bad things can happen. We've seen that happen before where people just make a bad statement and that comes back to bite them. Because certainly you can't point a gun at someone with the intention purely of determining if they have a weapon. That's not okay. Now you can point a gun at someone if they're in order to prevent them from committing a forcible felony, like kidnapping somebody in a and stealing their car. So that potentially the action is justifiable, but certainly not if the intention was purely to identify if that person was armed or not. But yeah, I think also there's a combination of several good Samaritans here that kind of step in. Certainly the guy whose car is getting robbed, the other guy. And if you look at the body cam footage from the officers who show up to arrest her, there seem to be some other people kind of standing nearby like, hey, if we got to tackle this chick, I'm in kind of thing. So all around, this lady's not in her right mind. She resists arrest pretty significantly. The officers do not have a good time putting her in cuffs. And it gets a little bit dicey. But I think we could have done some better things relative to the management of the gun and the deployment of the gun.
Yep. Let's be clear. There's a difference between, like when we use a gun in defense, right? There's got to be some kind of justification present, and there's a difference between saying, I drew or used my gun, and here is why, like a specific articulable. This other individual had a weapon, had opportunity, had intent, whatever it is, if you define specifically why you felt the need to use your gun, there's a difference between that and saying, well, I pointed my gun at her because I wanted to make sure she didn't have a gun or didn't have a weapon. Like that's not very specific justification.
It is. No, it is a specific justification. The problem is it's not a legal justification.
Okay, fair enough. Right.
So that's the problem.
But I guess my point is it's not tied. Like it's like a if in case of, and it's like that's not very. It's not very specific. In this case, it sounds like it's probably working out for him. But we want to be super careful with that kind of stuff. You don't point guns at people because you think they might be armed. You point guns at people because they are, or you have a reasonable belief that they are. Right.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if I could say, hey, I've done some research on carjackings, and based on the data I have, the criminal is very likely to be armed. I just presume that they probably were armed based on the data I have available to me. Like that could be a valid legal justification. But I pointed my gun at them to see if they were armed. less so.
Yeah,
And maybe more important here, I think this is kind of what you're getting at. I'm sorry I cut you off, but why
that's
speak to my
normal.
motive at all? Like why, like when you speak to your motive, you are handing the prosecutor a motive, right? And if that motive is not a good one, is not a justifiable one, that's problematic. So I just don't know why we need to speak to the intent or the
Yep,
motive at all.
yep, yeah, 100%. No, I agree. Good thoughts there. So, I mean, that's just some things that folks want to keep in mind. It's you got to have a reason to use deadly force, and pointing a gun at somebody is using deadly force, even if you're not pulling the trigger. So just keep that in mind. All right, let's get to the next one. That's a really good story. There's a lot to, I think, take away from that. I mean, everything from, like I said, the managing unknown context piece to what the actual actions of this gentleman. So I really appreciate that one. That's one that's worth thinking about some more and exploring yourself from hey, what would I do? What should I do? What does that look like in, other contexts as well that I could find myself in? And realize too, I mean, so many of the justified save incidents we report on happen where? At gas stations or Walmart parking lots, which we have one of those coming up here in a bit too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Homes, convenience stores, and Walmart parking lots. And if you need a number 4, it's Waffle House. I'm not wrong. Now I'm not saying that's bear in mind that there's a ton of convenience stores and there's a ton of Walmarts. So there is some sort of like a data bias in that, but
yep.
we see all those very regularly.
Yeah. Why don't you take the lead on this one, Jacob? Out of
Yeah.
Chicago, reported on WGNTV.com. The headline: CCL holder shoots 3 men outside his home after attack in Belmont, Cragen. Cragen. I don't even know what that is.
Crap, I know. So we got 4 total men involved in this incident. You have the homeowner, you have 3 attackers. And I got a little bit twisted up when I was reading this one because generally what we find is that attackers are of the same age. In this case, it's not. The homeowner is 43 years old. And then your 3 attackers are 22, 29, and 55.
Interesting makeup.
Yeah. So our 22 and 29-year-old are hanging out with a 55-year-old dude. And they're all 3 of them going to go attack this 40, what I say, 43? Yeah, 43-year-old homeowner. Now, the homeowner is hanging out outside. I don't know if he's watering his grass, if he's just sitting on the porch admiring the sunset. I don't know. But he's outside of his home doing something, chilling. It says standing outside his home is what we get. And it says an altercation ensued with 3 individuals that began to attack the man. Altercation ensued is interesting. Was this random? They're like, hey, let's go beat up that dude. Hey, let's go rob that dude. Or is it like, hey, that's the dude who called the cops on us because our music was too loud last week? I don't know. Or do they just walk by and say something about, something about his mama being fat and ugly, and the guy said, yeah, come say it to my face. And I mean, who knows, right? We don't know if this was a random thing or if there's some history here. It just says an altercation ensued. That stuff's funny to me because it's really probably some of the best information we could have as far as trying to learn something from the incident, like what caused the altercation to take place. But anyway, altercation takes place, and these guys start to attack the man. The 29, the 22, and the 55-year-old man start attacking. Now, there's something you need to understand. This is a 43-year-old dude you should never pick a fight with because all I know about this dude is he got shots on all 3 of his attackers. All 3 of the attackers went to the hospital with gunshot wounds. As if presuming that the news story would have said so. Otherwise, you can assume that the 43-year-old homeowner took no shots. Now, what we don't know is if these 3 attackers were armed. Did they have knives? Did they have guns? It doesn't specify. It does say a gun was recovered from the scene, but that could have been the homeowner's gun, the gun that was used by the good guy to defend himself, for all we know. Presuming he was a good guy defending himself.
We know there was an CCL holder, so
CCL, yeah,
good.
So he passed a background check. We know that. Right. We know he had the gun legally in his possession. But there's some altercation. That gun was used. 3 attackers were shot. They all went to the hospital, and presumably the 43-year-old dude is doing just fine. So good shooting.
Well, It does say
Yeah.
that he sustained blunt force trauma to the head and body. So we
Yeah.
know
So
that he
maybe,
took some licks for sure,
yeah,
but
yeah. And we don't know when he introduced the gun. I mean, I said that we don't know if the three attackers were armed or not. That doesn't necessarily mean it's not a justified attack, right? If you're taking blunt force trauma, if you're getting hit in the head and you fall into the ground, you're getting kicked in the face, that's a deadly attack. I mean, that could kill a guy
yep,
for sure. Especially if you have
for
any
sure.
reason to believe, what their motive is, right?
Right.
So yeah, I think
Yep.
probably justified, and probably some pretty dang good shooting.
Yeah.
Which I'll say the next story we're going to cover, you're going to see an example of somebody who really can't shoot.
It's like the opposite.
Yeah. So good
Yeah.
job.
I mean, you hit all the high points there. Yes, three attackers, all three are shot and wounded. The first guy is shot 5 times. And he's in critical condition. Second guy doesn't say how many times he's shot, but he's in critical condition. And the third guy shot once in the neck, or it says he had a gunshot wound to the neck, and also transported to the hospital in critical condition. So yeah, as you led this off with, this is a guy you don't want to get in a fight with because he hit all three and sent them all to the hospital in critical condition. Uh, yeah, it'd be really interesting to know more, like you said, about the specific, what actually led up to this, what started the altercation. I mean, they obviously were close enough and in proximity enough to land blows of some kind to his head and body. Presumably, at some point during all of that, he's able to retrieve a gun, I guess, on his person. I don't know how else he would have done it. But I mean, what a tale of survival, I guess, and prevailing over these attackers like that.
Yeah. Bang, 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 bang. I mean, just getting it done.
Yeah, if you got 5 shots on one and presumably at least one shot on each of the others. I mean, we're at 7 shots, but I suspect there's probably even more shots than that were fired. So that's another kind of, yeah. How many rounds am I carrying? My 5-shot revolver may not have been enough for this particular incident, right? Or
And who
maybe
is
even
not
10
running
shots would
away?
have been right,
Like
right.
if I'm in a group of three attackers, I'm one of the three dudes, and we're beating on this dude, and shots start ringing out, I'm running, right? And we don't know if they ran away or not, but I'm just saying, like, if it takes me 7 shots to put some distance between me and the dude with the gun, I am not an intelligent individual.
Now, on actionnews5.com out of Memphis, Tennessee, this story is fascinating to me. The title is Alleged Teen Triggerman in Deadly Community Center Shooting Fired in Self-Defense Won't Be Prosecuted. So this is, like I said, really fascinating. This actually happened back in April 16th. It happened behind a community center in Memphis, Tennessee. A 16-year-old boy is dead after this incident. He apparently is the one that initiated this altercation. A 17-year-old boy injured in this and is also the shooter, the surviving shooter that defended himself from the 16-year-old shooter. So it says it happened solely between these two teens. The 16-year-old was attempting to rob the 17-year-old, and at that point, he started, the 17-year-old defended himself with gunfire. So what's interesting about this is that, and this is according to the Shelby County Juvenile Court, they stated that it's imperative to note that the possession of the firearm in question was classified as a misdemeanor. So the 17-year-old is presumably charged with some kind of misdemeanor charge for a minor in possession of a firearm. However, the district attorney's office has clarified that in another, excuse me, according to the, oh, where did I see this? It may have been another article. I actually read 2 articles on this one, Jacob.
It says
But it said,
officials with the police department both say the case was not brought before the juvenile court because the Shelby County District Attorney's Office declined prosecution after careful consideration.
yeah, he's not being charged with anything to do with the actual shooting. I mean, keep in mind, he shot and killed in defense the 16-year-old boy. They've ruled it as a justifiable homicide. That's the fascinating thing about this. So you have a 17-year-old boy illegally carrying a firearm for defense, presumably, and defends himself successfully, may be on the hook for some kind of misdemeanor charge for carrying the gun, but not on the hook for the justifiable homicide itself. that just caught my attention. I'm like, we got to talk about this. This is just pretty fascinating.
I like this because I think there's a common misconception, and we hear this all the time from people who write into the podcast or in classroom settings or at events and things. Whereas there's a sense of like, in fact, the most common version of the question is probably, if I take my gun into a gun-free zone, into the
Mhm.
shopping mall, my job, what XYZ at the post office, XYZ place where I'm not allowed to have the gun, and I get involved in a defensive shooting and I shoot, like, am I going to jail? Am I in trouble? That's generally the version of the question that we hear. And I think that this there's two sides of this story that are fun. The first side is, well, you have to remember that you get charged for individual crimes. So if you break a law, you're charged for breaking that law, but it doesn't make all of your other actions illegal, right? It's not like because one element of what you did was criminal, therefore all of what you did is therefore criminal. Like, if it's self-defense, it's self-defense. Then you're not getting charged with shooting somebody. But if you had the gun in a place you couldn't have it, or in this case, had a gun when you're not allowed to have one, then that's a crime independently, and you could be charged with that crime, right? You could be charged with whatever crime you commit, but that doesn't make all your other actions or behavior illegal. So this is a good representation of that concept. And then the second half of this one, which is kind of fun, is, well, some DA somewhere looked at the circumstances and said, well, based on what went down, I think that we're just going to leave this one alone, even though he could be charged with this misdemeanor for having, for being in possession of this gun. I think we're just going to walk away from this one.
Hmm. And I just love it because, I mean, I believe self-defense is a basic human right. Like, our ability to ensure our personal safety and well-being is a basic human right. Like, we all have a right to life, and I believe that applies whether you are 75 or 16. And so I love this. I mean, we've certainly have covered stories where juveniles have retrieved a firearm within a home and used it in defense within a home. We've got a number of incidents where that was the case, and almost always those have been, completely justified, and no further investigation required. It always brings up an interesting, topic of discussion as far as, well, what kind of access to firearms do you make the decision to provide to juveniles in your home? I mean, it's firearm safety and storage is super, super important. But I think every household, every family, every parent's got to make a decision as far as what is acceptable for your family and your household. And I certainly am of the opinion, like, I mean, there's times I leave my 17-year-old or even my 15-year-old at home in charge of their younger siblings. It's a beautiful thing of having a built-in babysitter, uh, but at the same time, like, they're left home alone, and I want to know that they're safe, and I want to know they have the ability to defend themselves if necessary. And so I'm not exactly stating what my personal family's self-defense plan is in that regard, but it's something to consider. And self-defense applies whether you're 16, 17, 12, 92.
No, I don't disagree with anything you said. I also think that there's some world where we have to acknowledge the 17-year-old walking around with a gun is not normal and
No, it's
probably suggests some less than legal behavior.
that's
Uh,
fair. That's
right?
totally
Like,
fair.
I mean, you have a 17-year-old, I have a
Yep.
16-year-old. Neither of them cruise around with handguns.
I'm not
So
okay with that. That's true.
yeah, so there's something else going on here that would suggest that our legally self-defending person, based on what the evidence that's been presented, it maybe is generally not doing legal things. But
Yeah.
grateful to see that self-defense is self-defense.
Yeah. I can't remember where I found it, but there was another source that stated that they determined the 17-year-old, it was not like the fact his act of carrying a gun as a juvenile was not associated with gang-related behavior, and that was kind of interesting because quite often, like, you would make that assumption that, hey, a juvenile packing around heat is probably tied in, has something to do with illicit or gang-related type behavior, And this other source, I was just trying to find it, and I have been unsuccessful. But I remember reading that they determined it was not due to gang-related behavior, and I think they might have taken a different approach if that was the case here. It just makes you wonder if this 17-year-old had some history there, uh, perhaps even with this 16-year-old previously, and for whatever reason was like, "Hey, I know it's not right, but I'm going to pack some heat with me because I have reason to believe that something might go down," and in fact, something went down. I don't know,
No, I don't know either. Yeah,
but
not trying to presume, just suggesting there's more to the story
yeah,
when a
absolutely.
17-year-old's walking around with a gun.
Yes,
Yeah.
yep. Next story, ABC7Chicago.com. Dad gets into shootout with group trying to steal cars while 5 daughters sleep inside Winnetka home, or Winnetka. I don't know. I'm sure there's some proper pronunciation that we're unfamiliar with. What you got,
This
Jacob?
is in Illinois, right? Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Winnetka,
This
Illinois.
is this is like a Chicago suburb. It's actually known to be one of the wealthier suburbs in that area.
Yeah, apparently, dude's doing better than I am. So he about right before 5 a.m. So it's early in the morning. He wakes up because he hears sounds of his car starting outside. That's the word used, outside. So he runs out and he finds 3 thieves trying to steal 2 of his cars. And we specify here it's a Range Rover and a Maserati. So this ain't my neighborhood. I don't see a lot of Maseratis
Right.
around on my street. But anyway, that's not the point, though. I'm gonna talk about that more in a minute. So he says he quote yelled to the thieves to stop, threatening to shoot. All right, so imagine it's 5 a.m. You woke up, you hear your car starting, you grab your gun, you run outside. Hey, stop it or I'll shoot. This is like a Sylvester Stallone thing. And apparently he thought that threat might be sufficient. He maybe did not predict that would lead to getting shot at because there are 3 criminals who steal Maseratis and Range Rovers. They come prepared to the party. So shots fire, boom, 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 back off. We're taking your cars, go away. So he, quote, took cover behind a tree and returned fire. And then we do note later the two relevant things. One, there's no note of anyone being shot. And 2, I quote, dozens of shell casings riddled the street and sidewalk. So between the exchange of gunfire between the bad guys and the homeowner, the Maserati driver, there's lots of shots being fired. Plenty of ammo is being fired. If this dude ever gets his Maserati back, it's gonna have some bullet damage. That's what I think about that. So now that's kind of the end of the main thing, but we get some additional details here that I think are highly relevant. I'll mention these before I throw it back to you, Riley. The first one is the homeowner said the thieves were able to break into his home through the front office before stealing the keys from the garage.
Yeah.
So 2 relevant things there. One is that they before he hears the car start, before any of that drama, before him grabbing his gun, running outside, all those things, before any of that, the thieves first broke into his home through his front office and at some point stole the keys from the garage. Okay. That all happened at some point. The other thing that I think is kind of interesting is that the news journalist person went to some effort to make sure that that the homeowner has 5 daughters all sleeping in the home when this is all going on. They find that highly relevant.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, okay, so when I first read this, I was like, Range Rover, Maserati. I mean, these are pretty high-end vehicles, and probably not. I don't know. I don't. I guess I don't know enough, but I'm assuming they're not necessarily the easiest vehicles to steal, especially if they're like modern. They probably have wireless key fobs that have to be present in the vehicle to actually start the vehicle. I'm guessing there's not an easy way to like hot wire these or anything like that. And so that was like my initial thought was like, well, okay, how are we stealing these? Oh, we got keys from inside the house. So and specifically it says keys in the garage. Might not be the smartest place to keep keys to your vehicles that could be stolen. And so I mean, I know that not everybody's thinking in a high-end neighborhood fancy houses. Who knows? There's probably even fences and walls and whatnot. They're probably not worried that much about somebody breaking into their home, breaking into their garage, getting keys, stealing vehicles. But that's what happened here, and I strongly suspect this was targeted to some degree. In that, I suspect these thieves did some research and kind of had a sense of who's got what, where do they live, maybe even staked them out a little bit to get a little bit of intel. Because this is a pretty bold and daring operation to go after these cars, including the break into the home. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know why the homeowner didn't hear or wasn't aware of the break-in into the home until it said that he was essentially disturbed when he woke up to hearing sounds of his car starting outside. So that's definitely concerning. This makes you think, okay, what is your actual home defense and security plan like? Do you have a security system? Like somehow these guys got in there, you weren't aware until they were back out and starting up and trying to leave with your vehicles. So that's definitely a concern there. And of course, the whole attitude of threatening, or telling them to stop and then threatening to shoot upon, failure to stop. We're issuing, deadly force level commands over the failure to stop, theft of property, which is not exactly correct or proper. But, however, it appears that the actual use of force in this case was justified because as far as we could tell based on the reporting here, they began firing at him first. So, the one good thing he did in all of this was good use of tactics of taking cover behind the tree and returning fire. However, as far as we know, nobody was struck or injured throughout all of this. Makes you wonder. I mean, it says dozens of shell casings littered the street or the lawn or whatever. So lots of shots were fired. Apparently, nobody or anything too critical was hit. It just makes you wonder a little bit.
Yeah, I wondered a little bit if the car or cars were in a garage or if they're out on the street. He says he heard the car start outside, but the keys were in the garage.
Yeah,
That's not
I
where I
don't
keep my
know
keys.
who would park a Maserati,
On the street.
out. Yeah,
That was on my mind too. I'm like, dude, if you're driving a Maserati, which I did some googling here, depending on the model, that could cost you between $70,000 and $200,000 for a new
yeah,
Maserati today. So
yeah.
maybe it's a low. I mean, $70,000 car. That's a lot of cars that cost a lot that more than 50K. But anyway, I would presume if I was going to buy a Maserati, I would put it in a garage, man. Like I would afford a garage before I could afford Maserati. But anyway, that's not our place to
Yeah,
judge this dude.
I
I'm not.
I wondered if by starting hearing it start out. Sorry, I'm interrupting, but I wondered if saying he heard it outside, if that just meant like outside of the living space and but in the garage, or maybe these guys opened up the garage door and like put it in neutral and rolled it out, try to get it. I don't know, but
I don't
yeah,
know either,
who knows?
and I'm not trying to pass judgment on people and what
Yeah,
they do with their money. But it might make you think a little bit about your home defense plans and what you're doing. I'll give you another example that's maybe a little bit more practical to a lot of people listening to this. An average full-size truck does not fit in an average American garage. So if you drive a full-size truck because you want to or because your job requires it, you're almost certainly parking it on the street. I mean, you got to have a pretty fancy house to have a garage that fits a full-size truck. So that could be a good F-250, you know, whatever, higher end model. It's a pretty expensive truck. And
yep,
so you might be forced to park it on the street, for whatever, because you just don't have a garage that even fits it. So my point is that, there's some things here that you can apply to yourself. If you're thinking, well, I don't have a Maserati or a Range Rover, there's things that sometimes we inevitably end up having to do that maybe makes us more of a target or more vulnerable. And we have to accept that, hey, that's why we got insurance on that stuff. Me cruising out and saying, get out of the car or I'm going to shoot you might just be a good way to get shot at and maybe not my best plan.
yeah. Well, I was thinking about that too a little bit. I mean, you have these pretty high end vehicles, the Range Rover, Maserati. Uh, Almost certainly you've got good insurance on them. So uh, yeah, I mean, I get the idea that nobody wants their stuff to get stolen, especially their nice stuff. Like I get that. I don't want that either. Like I totally relate to people that attempt to stop. You feel like you're doing the right thing because this is an injustice. Somebody's stealing your stuff from you, uh, and you're probably even caught up in the moment a little bit and all those things, right? But still, like it's just stuff. And hopefully you got good insurance on it. At least you should. I mean, that's why we have insurance. I mean, I don't have cars anywhere close to as nice as those, but they've got insurance. So, I mean, that's just something to keep in mind. Like we got to keep perspective on such things because it's really easy to find ourselves in a position where we make really not smart decisions that can quickly, I mean, could destroy everything that we have. It's like, well, okay, I could lose two cars at total value of 150K or 200K or whatever it is, and that sounds terrible. Oh, but I got insurance, and I'll file a claim, and all will be well within a week or two. Versus, I unjustly engage a thief with gunfire in an attempt to stop him from taking my stuff, and all of a sudden I find myself charged with murder, and my entire life can be completely over. By the way, average home properties in Winnetka are like in the $2 to $3 million range. Just kind of puts it in perspective of, I mean,
Yeah, probably got a
this is
good sized
also somebody
garage.
that this is also somebody that probably has the money just to go and replace these things, even if they didn't have insurance.
Yeah,
But
maybe they've had that house a long time, Riley. Maybe they bought it for $200,000 2 years ago, and inflation has driven it to 3 million.
that's
you're
not that
you're
far from
you're
the truth.
welcome. You're welcome. So the takeaway I think is just certainly there's the whole disparity of action versus risk. There's definitely a question there about home security. What are we doing to keep people from breaking into our office? There's also, I think, a question here of almost certainly this is a targeted crime. Dudes don't just randomly roll down for $3 million home neighborhoods looking for easy steals. And if they do, they don't say, okay, let's break into the house through this window, and then go to the garage, look for and find the keys to these cars we want. And these are sophisticated criminals who are looking for sophisticated scores.
Oh yeah.
So, if you're a target, like you got to take proper precautions.
Yep. Absolutely. Good thoughts. Well, we got one more here to report on. This one out of Auburn, Washington. Actually, I have family that live in that area. This happened in an Auburn Walmart. 53-year-old woman shoots at attempted robbers outside that Walmart, according to comonews.com, K-O-M-O news.com. So police says here a shootout occurred Tuesday morning. This is a couple weeks ago. Two armed suspects attempted to rob a 53-year-old woman. She was sitting in her vehicle. All right, so that's a clue right there. Now, sometimes there's times where we got to sit in the vehicle, like it happens, it's a thing. But we're in a parking lot, which is a transitional space. We're in a vehicle, which is a confined space. Uh, in other words, that limits some of our options at times, right? But this is a perfect example of a place we need to be like absolutely, uh, you know, just dialed in because things can go sideways really fast. And so she's sitting in her vehicle in the parking lot outside that Walmart. Two suspects, ages 19 and 21, attempted to rob her. They demanded her property. It just says quote unquote property, whether that was her vehicle, whether that was other stuff, we don't know exactly. And she simply draws a gun and shoots at them. In fact, there's even an image with the story showing a shot out window of a vehicle, presumably hers. And so she draws her gun and shoots at them. She was shot also during this incident. She was treated for non-life threatening injuries. So good for her. I mean, that's very fortunate, but it's an example of, hey, just because you've got a gun and you've got a supposed plan doesn't mean you're going to walk away from something unscathed. Also, drawing a pistol while seated in a confined space in a vehicle, uh, it's not the easiest thing in the world. It's something that's good to have some training on. something that we've spent some time doing, and we even have our vehicle firearm tactics online video course that you can always check out in the concealedcarry.com Guardian University repository of training, where we talk about those kind of considerations as far as like, what does that look like, drawing your gun while seated inside a vehicle and engaging a potential threat without that vehicle. It's not an easy tactical thing to do, and it's, in fact, drawing and using the gun inside the vehicle or from within the vehicle is not your first choice. It's actually your last resort if you can. So, but that's what this woman chose to do, and they did eventually track down these suspects with the help of a canine officer and dog, and got them in custody within a couple of hours. So that was good. Of course, they're facing charges, but apparently, did I not read anywhere? Like, I don't think they were actually shot, the suspects themselves, but she was in the process.
It doesn't say one way or the other. It's entirely
Yeah.
plausible that they were shot. Canines sniffing blood would be a lot easier to catch people. So I don't know. I mean, we don't
Yep.
know, I guess, if they were shot. Yeah.
Yep. But there you go. So, any other lessons that you would take away from this one?
Well, just in case you're curious, like there's pictures of the car that the lady was in the story. This is a POS, man. Like we just got done talking about a Maserati. This car looks like a piece of junk. I mean, it's missing a front quarter panel from the front driver's side of the car. Like it looks like the little carpet stuff or whatever that's on the roof, the inside ceiling of the car is like falling down. Like
How
there's probably
judgmental
duct
of you,
tape.
Jacob.
I'm just trying to make a point, which is that we just got done making fun of the dude who can't put his Maserati in his $3 million home garage, which are all assumptions we're making. And now we're talking about somebody who's driving what looks like a 1999 Saturn that's seen better days, who got picked on in a Walmart by two armed individuals. So I'm sorry, I'm being a little extreme, and maybe I'm trying to be funny, but the takeaway is simply that like no one's exempt. Like it could happen to
That's
anybody,
true.
right?
Yeah, this is
Like,
two kind of opposite end, contrasting
yeah,
situations. Yeah.
someone might want to steal your 1989 Saturn just as much as they do. Someone might want to steal your Maserati or Range Rover. So we're all
Yeah.
vulnerable to bad people trying to do bad things. One last thought that's a little bit less meant to be entertaining, a little bit more serious. This is one of those situations I hate the most. The situations where I got armed people with guns who were asking me for my property. I hate the situation because there's no real way of knowing what their intentions are relative to me. Are they, if I just give them the property, can I walk away and we're all good? Yeah, insurance claim later and we're all set? Or are they going to shoot me when they get that car from me or that property from me or my wallet or whatever, the thing is that they want, my cell phone?
Yep.
In which case, this wasn't about the property alone. Like this was about more than the property. And I would have been better off to have taken, steps to stop this attack. And there's no real way of knowing. And that's the hard part here, because I believe myself to be an ethical and moral person. I also think that practically speaking and tactically speaking and legally speaking, I'm way better off if I don't have to shoot at people all the time. So I'm looking for opportunities to justify not shooting my gun, not drawing my gun, not deploying my gun. But this is one of those kinds of situations where it's just sort of like, well, crap. I mean, what are you going to do? And I don't have like a hard line on this. I'm not saying, hey, if someone walks up to you and sticks a gun in your face or a knife in your face and says, I want your car, get out, you definitely shouldn't shoot them, or you definitely should shoot them. I'm not saying that. I think from a legal perspective, you're probably justified in shooting if they're presenting a lethal force instrument and threatening you with it. But man, sure better off if you don't have to shoot. If it doesn't come to that, if you can just let the property go. But how do you know? How do you know? Maybe it's just some of that gut feeling and instinct gets, that you have to rely on. Maybe you're a kind of person who's going to draw a line in the sand and say, hey, if someone presents me with a death instrument or they're substantially larger than me, or they're in much greater numbers than me, if I think that they have the ability and potential intent to kill me or seriously injure me, that's good enough for me. That they've crossed the line. I'm going to deploy my gun. I think that's fine rule of engagement for you. I don't know if I'm there yet, but I think that I think about this all the time, and I tend to kind of rely on this, you know, kind of run on my gut instinct in the moment, kind of thing. And if my gut
Mhm.
instinct is it's my turn, draw and fire,
Mhm.
game on. But if my gut instinct is like, it's cool, man, you can have the car, then
Mhm.
I'm gonna wait my turn and see if that's good enough to resolve the incident. But anyway,
Yep.
just for whatever it's worth, this is one of those that's a little bit of a gray area in terms of my tactical priority and how I would react.
Yep.
If you haven't thought about it,
It
you know,
you're absolutely, I mean, you bring up very, very sound points. It is something that we have to wonder and contend with. Uh, we don't know what their intent is. We don't know what they will do, and I don't know that. I don't even necessarily know that our assailant knows exactly what their intent is at times. I'm reminded of, so recently, I went through a range master instructor development course. Tom Gibbons, famous instructor, and he does a great job presenting a bunch of different, things throughout that course, and one of those is sharing some lessons learned from various incidents. And a big takeaway from that course is people need to carry their guns, because I mean, stuff, well, he always talks about the statistics of those students that he's trained over the years, and how he's had 71 of them that have prevailed in incidents, in gun, so-called gunfights, let's say. Zero of them have lost, but three of them forfeited. And the three that forfeited, what he means by forfeit is they weren't carrying their guns on the day that they needed them, and it cost them their lives in all three incidents. One of the incidents he shared, and it's not one of his students, but just a story. And we talked about this on the podcast. I remember it came up, and this was a convenience store clerk in Tupelo, Mississippi, a couple years ago, who was completely compliant with his robber. Okay, guy came into the store, gun in hand, um, you know, starts cleaning out the cash drawer, all of that. The clerk is completely compliant throughout the whole incident, and the robber eventually tells him to get down on the floor, get down on your knees, and which he does. The robber then comes over the counter, and seeing what else I guess he can grab, and at some point he just simply executes that store clerk on the floor, shooting him once in the head. He then attempts to rip out what he thinks is the surveillance camera system to try to rid it of evidence, and then leave the scene of the crime. And when later, what I remember, what stood out in my mind, that when he was caught, arrested, I think even convicted now at this point. This is a couple years ago, or maybe that trial's still going on, or that case. But I know that after the fact, when asked about that, he simply said, in the moment, he made the decision to shoot and kill that guy because he wanted to know what it felt like to take a life. And so I shared that just to make the point of, I don't even know that sometimes these guys know exactly what their intent is. And then maybe in the moment, it's like, well, I have this completely compliant victim, this worthless sack of human flesh that, I just feel like killing them today. And that's what he did. What I know, Jacob, is that I want to have a vote in the matter. And if faced with someone attempting to rob me, and they're armed, I want to have a vote in my, whether I come out of that on the other side or not.
yeah,
And
yeah,
what
good
that
point.
means is better be prepared to I better be prepared to wait my turn, to look for the right opportunity to then flip and counter ambush them, right? And to do it well, and to do it decisively when that time comes, with incredibly violent action, within legal, limits, of course. That's what I want. And so, yeah, that's what I think about. That's what I take away from this.
Yeah, if I don't have a gun, or I don't have the skill, or I don't know how good my skill is, then it reduces my options. And so, at very least, I want to maximize my options to respond. And I think that's part of
Yeah.
that having a vote.
Yep. Yeah. We do need to. Yeah. weigh the circumstances of the situation and make the best decision we can, for sure, for sure.
I'll add one last just quick thought. I don't know, it might have been you, Riley, who sent me the article, but I saw recently that Walmart has had a pretty significant increase in business domestically here in the US in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And they attribute a
Yep.
lot of that growth to people who have an income of over $100,000 a year, six-figure income households. So, with the economy being what it is and things being hard and all the things, more people are shopping at Walmart than have previously. People who maybe previously thought Walmart was beneath them are going back to Walmart to do some shopping. So, you
Yep.
know, for whatever that's worth, like Walmart's a place where you get all sorts. I'm not trying to insult Walmart. Sometimes I think we just see more shootings at Walmart's because the statistical probability of having a shooting at a Walmart's higher than a lot of places because there's so many locations. Because it's a large retailer with a lot of traffic. But for whatever it's worth, like when you're out in the public world, when you're sitting in a parking lot, I don't care if it's a Target, a Walmart, or whatever else, a gas station, an auto parts store, risk increases. Like that's just how it's going to be versus when you're sitting at work in your office or when you're driving down the road at 75 miles an hour. Like some places are more vulnerable than others, but a really high vulnerable one is a parking lot. And
Yep.
so, man,
Yeah.
parking lots are bad news.
We want to minimize our time that we spend in transitional spaces for sure. So give that some thought and plan accordingly throughout your days. So yeah, I learned something else. I learned interesting, Jacob, from the Rangemaster course with Tom Givens. He said that Walmart itself has there's like 100 and something attorneys like on staff that just deal with all of the liability claims that come up with like violent crimes that take place on their properties throughout the U.S.
That
It's
sounds
like,
very believable, right?
dang.
Like none of us are surprised by that. Like, I mean, they have deep pockets, and anyone with deep pockets today is vulnerable
Yep.
to constant lawsuits, whether they're legitimate or frivolous. And so, yeah, I mean, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Walmart is the largest retailer in America. They're the largest grocer in America. They sell more groceries than any other company in America. And they have more locations than almost any other company in America. I mean, they're like in the top 10, Subway, McDonald's, Walmart. So they're going to be a ton of crime there, and there's going to be a ton of lawsuits associated with that for sure.
Yep. Yeah. Cool. Well, it's a good place to wrap this up. A little bit more than an hour in. Thank you for doing this episode with me. It's a good Justified Saves episode, I think. A lot of good stuff here we covered today. A reminder, folks, that today's episode is sponsored by HK. Again, you can learn more at hk-usa.com, as well as by CCWSafe, ccwsafe.com. Don't forget to like and share and subscribe to the podcast. Hit that subscribe button, hit the notification button. Make sure you get notified when we go live or when we release new episodes. We try to bring you a new episode every week. I realize that sometimes we've fallen short of that goal, but we do the best we can with everything we got going on here. Don't forget, by supporting our sponsors and by supporting us directly, of course, we always appreciate those of you that go to concealedcarry.com or any of our associated brands websites and buy product from us. Supports our ability to continue to bring to you what we hope is valuable content here in the form of the Concealed Carry podcast. Yeah, Jacob, anything else? Final words?
No, thanks everyone who supports us. We really appreciate it, and we are putting in time and energy to try and improve the podcast, try and improve Guardian Nation, try and improve our various products, and put out good stuff. So thank you for hanging in there with us, as we know that we're not a perfect business, and we're doing our best to.
Yep, you got it, folks. Well, until next time, a reminder to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.